During a time in which revenues in Major League Baseball continue to soar, relations between the players in the league are heading for a free fall. As one former MLB player put it, the union has backtracked, and Marvin Miller, the former executive director of the Major League Baseball Players Association who helped deliver free agency to players, is probably spinning in his grave about it. As the current collective bargaining agreement, CBA, is navigated by both sides, maintaining labor peace will no longer be a simple negotiation. Any bickering between the two sides had been minimal in recent years, but along with the strange happenings this past offseason, the word collusion reared its ugly head, and it was evident that players were more than simply frustrated by the glacier-like pace of the free agency period combined with the number of 30-somethings left without jobs. Most recently, the discussion of whether the designated hitter should be added to the National League or the league's desire to institute a rule that disallows the defensive shift has been met with pointed discussions. At the All-Star game, MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred's comments ruffled feathers when he laid the blame of Mike Trout's untapped marketing power in the player's lap rather than the league's. Since the day baseball players won free agency rights, the relationship between the MLB Players Association, MLBPA, and MLB owners has fluctuated from combative acrimony to peaceful complacency. While labor peace has existed since 1995, recent shifts in the distribution of revenue signal a downward spiral whereby the union and its players are losing ground to owners. As such, the disparity in strength could lead to further strife. The trends leading to the union's perceived declining strength might seem to be recent, however the writing on the wall was ignored in lieu of attaining minor perks. Regardless of how tensions continue to increase from a simmer to a slow boil, the reality is that historical cycles and labor negotiations are very real, and we are witnessing the beginning of a period in which the union might be forced to take action, even if small measures, in an effort to regain a grip on the pot of gold. Sporting News spoke with 4 former MLB players from eras ranging from the time leading up to free agency through the current decade. Each player conveyed similar stories detailing their time in the union, speaking of the association's strengths as members and potential weaknesses for active players in today's game. David Cone, a former Cy Young Award winner and 5-time All-Star pitcher who played with 5 teams from 1986 to 2003, was clear that he had no insight as to the desires of the players negotiating this most recent CBA. However, Cone likened the main issue that plagued players in the 1990s to one that is brewing in 2018. One of our bigger fears in regard to a potential hard salary cap was that it would diminish the middle class, Cone said. The superstars would still get paid top dollar, and that would be supplemented with players under contractual control or players making minimum wage. So, middle-of-the-road players would get squeezed, and that's kind of what you're seeing now. When large market teams decide to stay below the luxury tax threshold, like the Dodgers and Yankees managed thus far this season, it works similarly to a hard cap. Further, since teams can be assured of maximum spends on drafts and international signings based on pool amounts, it allows organizations to plan accordingly to use younger players as often as possible. Benefiting from the wage minimums in place for players not eligible for arbitration or free agency, it provides owners substantial leverage when building their rosters. These factors have a tendency to marginalize those veteran players that worked hard to establish their rights, and by the time they get to free agency they are at the end or toward the decline for their career, and it puts them in a tough spot. When presented with the idea of players reaching arbitration and/or free agency earlier according to service time, Cohn believed it would certainly be of interest to the players, however it may be a rather difficult negotiation. It is something I would certainly look at if I were part of the Players Association, trying to be freer sooner, Cohn said. For the players it is a rights issue. If they stay on the fact that they are bargaining for rights as opposed to trying to bargain for more money, that's a good way to try to move forward. Rudy May pitched for 4 major league clubs across a 16-year span beginning in 1965. May saw free agency, the most prominent rights issue in MLB history, come together firsthand, enjoying a personal connection with close friend Andy Messersmith, one of free agency's groundbreakers. May witnessed the union's evolution as players broke through the restraints of the reserve clause. I saw the union become a strong entity, really strong, May said. May admitted he is mostly out of the loop with the game these days, however he made a keen observation about owners in professional sports in general. Owners didn't accumulate that amount of money by being fools, May said. So, it kinda says to you that, if they get the chance, they are going to hit back. Fight back, and that may be what's happening now. Robert Tufts, who spent parts of 3 seasons in the big leagues including the 1981 strike-shortened season, tends to agree with May's assertion. Tufts, now an adjunct professor at UCLA University teaching management courses, argues that current executives in the MLBPA must establish a bargaining position in which the players can unify in order to offset the owners' advances. Back then, the 1980s, pensions were the gold standard, arbitration was a gold standard, free agency was. Then with the current success, increasing revenues, these things were not as important. In the latest negotiations, MLBPA chief Tony Clark and the players passed on fighting for extended financial rights in lieu of travel improvements, clubhouse upgrades, full-time chefs, dietitians and access to sports psychologists. This could be a decision the union and players regret now and might affect their future bargaining positioning. Perhaps due to complacency, Tufts believes the owners have secured a significant advantage over the players, stating the owners have the upper hand for the first time since free agency began. Tufts went so far as to say that the split of power could be in the 60-40ths or 70-30ths% range in favor of the owners. Tufts was adamant that the MLBPA would have to convey its next strategic message to the players as clearly as possible. Does the union go to all the players clause by clause and say these are things that are harming us, these are things we are getting ready to negotiate? Tufts asked. How aggressive will the union be in saying we did not get everything we wanted? Fans should not be alarmed by the strong language, as Tufts feels a strike is not the best avenue. It's always better to fight the battles with the singles as opposed to going for the home runs, which is the strike, Tufts said. So, basically take care of the issues as they come up and try to win the little pieces as they build. Those issues could be about adding the DH to the NL, players might push for it as it would provide more jobs, the elimination of defensive shifts, or how players are used to market the game. If the players can create some leverage to work their way into accords with the league on these issues, there could be concessions at the bargaining table down the line. Finally, Sporting News spoke with former reliever Bill Bray, who played 6 seasons in the big leagues, the last being 2012. Bray, now a client manager for Octagon Baseball, provided some interesting perspectives and faith in the strength of the union. Bray stressed that we shouldn't look too intently on this past offseason when drawing inferences about what might be coming down the road in free agency and the strength of the union. I definitely think it was an odd market, but to make a conclusion based on one offseason would be a little premature, Bray said. I don't think the union has weakened at all. That said, Bray also agreed that certain changes have gained the attention of the players. This offseason, with some of the things that have been going on, it's been a wake-up call for a generation of players, and I would include myself in that, who did not see labor strife, Bray said. If something were to come up that would require the players to step up and take a stand, I have absolute confidence they would stand up and stand together, just like the generations of players before them. Where Tufts and Cone maintained that the union will need a rallying point, maybe that ends up being a battle surrounding the demise of defensive shifts. Bray noted that securing change believed to be a plus for one side doesn't always pan out. The difficult thing about any collective bargaining agreement is that you negotiate changes that you think are in the best interests and are going to work out the way you want. But the tough thing is that you don't know how the rule changes are going to work until you get a few years into the agreement. It will be important for players to decide whether they try to come to compromises on the multiple items currently on the table or chance the relationship straying further into acrimony than it already stands. For example, the nature in which the union and MLB handle these seasonal rules changes will affect the negotiation process when creation of the new CBA is before both sides. If the union is as strong as we know it was in May's time, and it is believed to be by Bray now, it will have to zero in on areas to which they can effect real change. As Tufts stressed, the time to bring issues to the players is now, and if the remedies suggested center on rights versus straight dollars and cents as Cone believes, the union may be able to bring the balance back to the center in the next iteration of the CBA.